Imagine a world teetering on the edge, a nation holding its breath as ancient prophecies clash with the raw terror of an unknown future. What if, at this very moment of crisis, a divine whisper cut through the clamor, choosing one man to record not just history, but the very blueprint of humanity's salvation? Have you ever felt the weight of impending doom, the crushing anxiety when everything you hold dear seems vulnerable? This is the world into which the prophet Isaiah stepped, a world much like our own, rife with fear, political intrigue, and a desperate longing for something, anything, to make sense. Today, we peel back the layers of a biblical narrative that doesn't just foretell events, but unveils the profound, often shocking, heart of God's redemptive plan, resonating with an urgency that speaks directly to our modern souls. Prepare to witness how a single book, penned centuries ago, becomes a coded message for our generation, detailing a virgin birth, a gruesome crucifixion, and the most intimate portrait of a promised Messiah, all with breathtaking precision. This isn't just an old story. It's a living testament to a God who orchestrates history, leaving breadcrumbs of hope for every anxious heart. The year was marked by shadows stretching long across Jerusalem. King Uzziah, a steady hand for over half a century, was gone. His death plunged the kingdom of Judah into a chilling uncertainty. Panic wasn't just a rumor, it was a palpable presence in the marketplace, a silent language spoken in the eyes of every citizen. Their king had brought an era of prosperity, a rare season of peace, but now his absence felt like a dark omen, heralding an age of peril. Isaiah, a young priest from a revered lineage, observed this unfolding drama with a growing disquiet. He had been raised on tales of divine power, steeped in the ancient rituals of the temple since childhood. Isaiah, a young priest from a revered lineage, observed this unfolding drama with a growing disquiet. He had been raised on tales of divine power, steeped in the ancient rituals of the temple since childhood. Yet Jerusalem, his beloved city, seemed to have lost its moral compass. Corruption, a creeping vine, entwined itself around the heart of the holy city. Those meant to be beacons of righteousness, the nobles and priests, now chased after fleeting earthly gains, their spiritual integrity compromised. Isaiah felt a deep ache within his soul. He retreated to a small, private chamber near the temple, seeking solace in silent meditation. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows as if to warn of an impending storm, both literal and spiritual. A profound intuition stirred within him, a sense that something monumental was about to shift, though its exact nature remained shrouded. His heart throbbed with a volatile mix of apprehension and an inexplicable anticipation. The sudden burst of the door shattered the quiet. "Brother Isaiah! Brother Isaiah!" cried Jeremiah, his closest confidant, his face etched with alarm. "Have you heard the news? Our borders are under siege. The Assyrians are marching against us. They say with Uzziah gone, we are nothing but easy prey." Isaiah inhaled deeply, bracing himself before responding. "And our people, Jeremiah, how do they face this?" Jeremiah's gaze fell to the floor, his posture dejected, a portrait of utter despair. Some whisper of alliances with pagan nations, seeking help from gods that are no gods at all. Isaiah's expression darkened further, a shadow crossing his features. "Jeremiah, our salvation does not lie in the fickle promises of men. Our strength, our very survival, is in returning to the God of our fathers." Jeremiah met his friend's gaze, a question etched in his eyes. "But who will listen now, Isaiah? Who will heed your words in a time when fear suffocates reason?" Isaiah paused, his eyes drifting towards the horizon, where bruised, heavy clouds began to congregate. "Perhaps no one will hear me today, but someone must speak. Someone must remind our people of the true King, the one who truly reigns." Jeremiah nodded slowly, a flicker of conviction ignited by his friend's unwavering faith. Later, as Isaiah made his way towards the temple, he witnessed the raw nerves of his city. Men argued heatedly in the streets, their voices sharp with anxiety. Women openly wept for their sons, knowing the drums of war could soon call them to battle. An aged priest, his face a map of weariness, approached Isaiah. "Young Isaiah, do you honestly believe God still hears us? Look around you. He has abandoned us." Isaiah's reply was calm, yet firm, radiating an inner peace. God would never abandon us. It is we who have strayed from Him. The old man merely shook his head, a ghost of disbelief in his eyes, and shuffled away. Entering the temple, Isaiah was enveloped by a heavy, almost tangible silence. He approached the altar, kneeling slowly, his heart pouring out in prayer. "God of our fathers, we are adrift. Our nation has strayed from your law. Our hope is but a dying ember. Where else can we turn but to you?" As he prayed, a powerful wind swept through the sacred space, gently rustling the veil that shielded the Holy of Holies. An indescribable presence began to fill the chamber, growing in intensity, overwhelming his very being. A brilliant light, too magnificent to behold, burst forth from behind the veil, piercing him with its pure, unadulterated radiance. Tears welled in Isaiah's eyes, his body convulsing uncontrollably. "O Lord," he cried, his voice a mere tremor, "what glory is this I am witnessing?" A voice, deep and resonant, majestic beyond human comprehension, boomed through the temple. "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory." Isaiah fell prostrate, unable to withstand the sheer force of the divine encounter. Overwhelmed by a profound sense of uncleanness, of utter unworthiness, he cried out in anguish, "Woe is me! I am ruined! For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Swiftly, a celestial being, a seraph, flew towards the altar, grasping a burning coal with tongs. Isaiah's heart hammered against his ribs. The seraph approached him with an ethereal calm, extending the glowing ember towards the young priest's lips. Isaiah's heart hammered against his ribs. The seraph approached him with an ethereal calm, extending the glowing ember towards the young priest's lips. "Fear not, Isaiah," the celestial being declared, its voice gentle yet resonating with divine authority. "This coal has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is forgiven." The pain Isaiah felt was a searing agony, a purification by fire, but it was also profoundly liberating, a deep cleansing from within. Then the divine voice echoed once more throughout the temple. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah slowly lifted his head. Despite the unknown trials that surely lay ahead, he felt an irresistible pull, a deep spiritual compulsion to respond. With newfound resolve, he lifted his voice. "Here am I, Lord, send me!" Little did he know, the vision he had just experienced, the encounter with the living God, would forever alter the course of his life, haunting him with its glory and its demands. Isaiah remained kneeling on the cold temple floor, his heart a frantic drumbeat, his mind reeling in a storm of confusion and awe. The burning sensation still lingered on his lips, a physical reminder of the seraph's touch. But now a new reality began to unfold before his eyes, transcending all human comprehension. The very air around him seemed to vibrate, the ground, the ancient walls, pulsating with an indescribable power. A light of such intensity materialized that Isaiah instinctively shielded his eyes with trembling hands, unable to bear the blinding brilliance. Through the narrow gaps between his fingers, extraordinary details began to emerge. Before him stood a throne, majestic and elevated, radiating a pure, piercing light. Seated upon it was the Lord, a vast, immeasurable presence, whose face no mortal could gaze upon, so immense was his glory. Around the throne, celestial beings, seraphim, with 6 wings each, flew in perpetual motion. Isaiah watched, a mix of terror and fascination gripping him. With 2 wings, they veiled their faces. With 2, they covered their feet. And with the remaining 2, they soared in the air. A deep, resonant melody, ancient and powerful, echoed through the temple, repeating without cessation. "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The voices of these beings vibrated deep within the prophet's very soul, causing every fiber of his being to tremble. The entire temple seemed to shudder under the intensity of that divine proclamation, as thick smoke began to billow, partially obscuring his vision. Overwhelmed by a profound sense of inadequacy, Isaiah murmured to himself, "How can I be here? This is far too much for any human to endure." With each repetition of the celestial chant, his heart sank deeper into the painful awareness of his own impurity. It wasn't just fear, it was an overwhelming wave of shame in the blazing light of divine perfection. He bowed his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, falling silently onto the cold temple floor. "I am undone," he whispered, trembling under the crushing weight of that terrifying revelation. "I am unworthy of this. I do not deserve to witness such glory. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." Isaiah pressed his hands to his chest, desperately trying to ease the suffocating pressure that bore down upon him. His breathing grew shallow, his body weakening under the sheer magnitude of the vision. "Why have you brought me here, Lord?" he groaned, feeling utterly incapable of standing in such holiness. As he remained kneeling, the divine voice that reverberated through the temple seemed to intensify, growing even more powerful. The young priest realized that the very foundations of the temple were quaking beneath the force of the celestial pronouncement. Isaiah began to sob uncontrollably, his tears a torrent, recognizing the profound gravity of his own flawed condition before the perfect holiness that surrounded him. "There is no salvation for me here," he whispered in despair. "I am before the living God. No mortal can survive his presence." Suddenly, a shadow fell over Isaiah, interrupting his anguished thoughts. He slowly lifted his head and saw one of the seraphim swiftly approaching. His heart pounded with renewed terror, convinced that this moment would mark his end. The celestial being held something in its hands, something glowing with an intense, otherworldly heat. Isaiah struggled to identify it, and his heart nearly stopped when he finally recognized it. A burning coal, taken directly from the heavenly altar. The searing glow of the ember seemed to illuminate the entire temple, casting dancing shadows on the smoke-filled walls. The celestial being drew closer, its piercing eyes fixed on the trembling prophet. "No, Lord, I cannot bear this," Isaiah pleaded, trying in vain to shrink away. The being landed gently before him, holding the glowing coal firmly in one hand, its eyes radiating both calm and an ancient assurance. "Isaiah," the seraph said with a deep, comforting voice, "this coal will touch your lips to purify you. Do not be afraid." Before Isaiah could even react, he felt the searing heat of the coal make contact with his lips. The intense pain was strangely mingled with an indescribable sensation of relief and cleansing. He cried out, not merely from the physical agony, but from the overwhelming spiritual shock of the purification. The celestial being smiled gently as it withdrew the coal from Isaiah's lips. "Your guilt has been removed. Your sin is forgiven." Still dazed by the intensity of the moment, Isaiah slowly lifted his eyes to the glorious throne before him. He felt incredibly light, as if a crushing, invisible burden had been completely lifted from his heart and soul. Then a powerful and profound voice resonated once again, this time with a crystalline clarity that could not be ignored. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" The divine voice seemed to penetrate Isaiah's very bones, filling him with an unshakable, supernatural conviction. Without a moment's thought of any future consequences, Isaiah responded immediately, his voice now firm and resolute. "Here am I, Lord, send me." But even as he spoke those words, a deep chill ran down his spine. Something within him whispered clearly that his life as he knew it would never be the same. He had no inkling of the pain, the profound rejection, and the immense trials that still awaited him on this chosen path. The intense light slowly began to recede, and Isaiah realized that the overwhelming vision was drawing to a close. But before he could even breathe a sigh of relief, a sudden wave of deep anguish washed over him. Something remained hidden, a truth he would have to carry, understand, and proclaim for a long, arduous time. Just when he thought the experience was truly over, a new, terrifying image began to form slowly before his eyes. The heat still burned on Isaiah's lips, a phantom fire, even after the celestial being had withdrawn with the burning coal. The sensation of purification remained, pulsing intensely, a pain mixed with a strange sense of relief, as if with every passing second something impure was being irrevocably torn from within him. Isaiah remained kneeling, eyes closed, breathing heavily, his body trembling. His hands, resting on the cold temple floor, could barely support his weight. It was as if he stood on a precipice, suspended between life and death, between the frail human and the all-encompassing divine. A soft yet firm voice broke the silence. "Rise, Isaiah." He opened his eyes with effort. Before him, still hovering in the air, was the seraph who had touched his lips. The light surrounding him was less blinding now, but the glory of the place remained undeniable, a sacred aura. "Your guilt has been removed," the celestial being repeated,
its voice resonating with ancient truth. Your sin has been forgiven. Isaiah, his voice raspy, asked, "Why? Why me? I am nothing more than a fragile man, a sinner." The seraph merely smiled, a knowing, gentle expression, as if the answer were too profound, too obvious to be fully articulated in human words. Then the very atmosphere began to vibrate once more. A voice, more powerful, more majestic than any Isaiah had ever heard, echoed through the ancient walls of the temple. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah felt his heart seize for a moment. The question seemed to hang suspended in the air, awaiting a response, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting on the decision of a single, humble man. He looked around frantically, as if searching for someone else, someone more worthy, who might take on such an immense responsibility. But the temple was empty, save for the celestial beings and the overwhelming, tangible presence of God. I am here." His voice came out weak at first, a mere whisper, but then it gained strength, as if a new divine vigor was rising from the depths of his being. "Here am I, send me." The words left his lips before he could even consciously reflect on their monumental consequences. It was an impulse, a deep, undeniable inner certainty, a response not born of the calculating mind, but of the awakened soul. For a brief moment, an absolute silence descended. Not even the seraphim sang. Only the sound of Isaiah's heavy, rapid breathing filled the sacred air. Suddenly, the light around the throne grew brighter, more intensely radiant. It was as if heaven itself was responding, accepting his courageous, sacrificial answer. The celestial being before him drew closer once more, looking him directly in the eyes, with a gaze that held both profound compassion and solemnity. "Then listen carefully, Isaiah," he said, his voice deep and grave. "The path you have chosen will not be an easy one. Your words will be like hammers breaking stone, but they will strike hearts of stone. You will speak to this people, but they will shut their ears. You will prophesy, but they will not believe." Isaiah furrowed his brow, a wave of confusion washing over him. "Lord, how long will this continue? Until when will they refuse to listen?" The answer came like thunder rumbling through the temple walls, shaking the very foundations. "Until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant. Until the houses are deserted and the fields desolate. Until the Lord drives the people far away and the land is left utterly forsaken." Isaiah's blood ran cold. His hands began to tremble again, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of the mission's true scope. Isaiah's blood ran cold. His hands began to tremble again, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of the mission's true scope. He sensed that this divine commission was far greater, far heavier than he had ever imagined in his darkest premonitions. The celestial being then made a gesture towards him, a sign of enduring hope. "But Isaiah, even in the midst of destruction, a remnant will remain. A stump, a holy seed will survive." Isaiah took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to absorb the enormity of it all. He felt small, powerless, a mere vessel. Yet at the same time, a new fire, a divine passion began to burn within his chest, a fire that no rejection, no pain, and no future suffering could ever extinguish.
Still on his knees, he closed his eyes for a moment, mentally and spiritually bracing himself for the colossal task that lay ahead. When he opened his eyes again, the temple seemed to have returned to its normal state. There was no more billowing smoke, no visible seraphim, no blinding radiant light. But Isaiah knew, with an absolute certainty, that his life would never, could never, be the same again. He stood slowly, his gaze lingering on the altar with a mixture of profound awe and deep reverence. As he stepped out of the temple, the first tentative rays of sunlight pierced through the lingering clouds, as if the heavens were whispering to him, "This is only the beginning of your journey, prophet." Isaiah took a few steps outside and, looking towards the bustling city, saw the people going about their routines, completely unaware of the supernatural, life-altering experience he had just lived through. Jeremiah, his loyal friend, spotted him from afar and ran to meet him. "Isaiah, where were you? You look different." Isaiah, his eyes still glowing with the faint afterglow of emotion, simply smiled, took a deep breath of the morning air, and replied, "Jeremiah, I believe God has given me a mission." Jeremiah stared at him, startled, a question forming on his lips. What kind of mission? Isaiah looked to the horizon, his expression now serious, infused with a newfound, grave determination. A mission that will hurt more than I can possibly imagine right now. He answered without hesitation, blissfully unaware of just how profoundly painful and challenging his divine commission would truly be. Isaiah walked slowly through the familiar, dusty streets of Jerusalem, each step carrying the echo of the divine voice that still resonated in the deepest chambers of his mind. "Go and tell this people." But the words God had spoken immediately after, the prophecy of the people's hardened hearts, weighed heavily upon the young prophet's soul. "Jeremiah," Isaiah called out to his friend as they approached a small square where men were already engrossed in heated arguments about the grim politics of war and survival. "I need to tell you something of immense importance." Jeremiah turned quickly, his brows furrowed with concern. "You're still not yourself, Isaiah. Ever since that morning in the temple, your eyes have changed. They hold a light I've never seen." What truly happened? Isaiah took a deep, shaky breath, as if drawing courage from the very depths of his being. "God called me," he began, then hesitated for a moment, grappling with the crushing weight of the next revelation. "But he also revealed to me that the people will not listen to me." "What do you mean?" asked Jeremiah, his frown deepening in confusion. "God said they will have ears but not truly hear, eyes but not truly see. Their hearts will become hardened, impervious to truth." Jeremiah fell silent for a few agonizing seconds, his mind struggling to process the impossible, contradictory nature of what he had just heard. "So you're saying God is sending you to preach, already knowing that no one will listen to your words?" "Exactly," Isaiah replied, his gaze now filled with a profound sorrow, a deep understanding of his lonely path. "My mission is to proclaim Jeremiah, even if no one, absolutely no one, wants to hear the truth." His friend ran a frustrated hand through his hair, his confusion deepening into bewilderment. "That makes no sense, Isaiah. Why would God do such a thing? What purpose could there be in such a futile endeavor?" Isaiah sighed deeply, a long, weary exhalation. "Because even in the midst of overwhelming rejection, there is a greater purpose at play, a hidden thread of hope. A remnant will be saved. A holy seed will remain. The two walked on in a heavy silence, their thoughts miles apart, until they reached the bustling entrance of the marketplace. There, Isaiah spotted a group of prominent religious leaders, the same men he had seen countless times in the temple, their faces etched with self-importance. Approaching cautiously, Isaiah raised his voice, letting it carry over the din of the market. "O people of Jerusalem, thus says the Lord, listen closely, but do not truly understand. Look clearly, but do not truly perceive." Some men paused, drawn by the prophet's intense gaze and commanding voice. Others merely shook their heads, laughing with open disdain. "Another prophet of doom with his gloomy pronouncements," one of them muttered, turning away with a dismissive wave. "We don't need prophets," shouted another, his voice laced with aggression. "We need soldiers. We need strength." Isaiah, his gaze fixed and full of an unshakable determination, continued, his voice rising above the jeers. "Harden the hearts of this people, O Lord. Shut their ears, blind their eyes, until the cities lie in ruins, until the fields are laid waste, until the land is utterly forsaken. Shut their ears, blind their eyes, until the cities lie in ruins, until the fields are laid waste, until the land is utterly forsaken." A stunned silence fell over the square for a few seconds, the sheer audacity of his words hanging heavy in the air. But soon the laughter and insults began again, more vicious than before. "Go away, Isaiah!" shouted an elderly man, his face contorted with anger. "We don't need your threats or your impossible prophecies." Jeremiah, seeing the growing hostility, rushed to his friend, grabbing him firmly by the arm. "Let's go, Isaiah. They're simply not ready to listen to this." As they walked away, Isaiah suddenly stopped and looked back at the retreating figures, a profound sadness settling over him. Something inside him, a chilling premonition, told him that this initial rejection was only the very beginning of a long, excruciatingly painful road. That night, back in the sparse solitude of his small home, Isaiah knelt and prayed, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Lord, how long will I preach and not be heard? How long must I watch my beloved people drift further and further from you?" The answer came, not as a thunderous pronouncement, but as a deep, quiet whisper in his troubled mind. "Until the land is devastated, until chaos covers the cities, until only a burned stump remains. But from that stump, life will rise again." Isaiah slowly opened his eyes, feeling a profound mixture of fear for the judgment and a flicker of unyielding hope for the promise. Days later, the news, grim and relentless, began to arrive. Enemy troops were advancing, like a creeping tide of destruction. Hunger, a cruel companion, started to stalk the streets. Injustice, a festering wound, grew in the heart of the city. The very words Isaiah had prophesied, the dire warnings, were beginning to manifest before his very eyes. And still, the people, blinded by their own pride and fear, remained tragically indifferent. One morning, while passing through the marketplace, Isaiah heard a group of women weeping, their cries echoing with fresh sorrow. "Another village destroyed," one of them lamented, her voice broken. Isaiah clenched his fists, his jaw tight. They must hear, they must understand the gravity of their choices, he muttered fiercely to himself. Jeremiah appeared from around a corner, his face grim. "Isaiah,
Are you truly going to keep going, even in the face of such relentless opposition?" "Until my last breath," he answered, his voice ringing with an unwavering resolve. Isaiah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his journey would be marked by relentless pain, profound rejection, and aching solitude. But something deeper inside him, a divine spark, told him that God's ultimate purpose was infinitely greater than he could possibly comprehend at that moment. Yet, the greatest revelation of all, the most astonishing truth, was still waiting to be unveiled. Days in Jerusalem had taken on a new, heavier tension. Each morning brought fresh, agonizing news: battles lost, political alliances crumbling like ancient parchment, the specter of hunger deepening in the nearby villages. Isaiah walked the streets, observing the weary, downcast faces of his people, each etched with a silent struggle. He knew his mission was to proclaim, to speak God's truth, even if no one listened. But that knowledge did nothing to lessen the crushing weight in his heart. One cloudy afternoon, a summons arrived for Isaiah to appear at the royal palace. King Ahaz, now occupying the throne, appeared insecure, hesitant, a figure completely consumed by a paralyzing fear. The looming threat of invasion from the combined forces of Israel and Syria had driven the monarch into an absolute panic. Upon entering the throne room, Isaiah immediately sensed the suffocating tension. Armed guards stood stiffly, their faces grim. Advisors murmured anxiously in hushed tones, their faces pale with worry. "Isaiah!" the king called out, his voice a desperate plea, his eyes wide with terror. "What does your God say about all of this?" "We're surrounded by enemies. My heart, my very soul, is consumed by an overwhelming fear." Isaiah took a deep, steadying breath. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, drawing strength from a hidden wellspring of divine courage. Then, with deliberate steps, he moved closer to the king. "Hear me, O house of David. Do not fear these two smoldering stubs of firewood," he began, his voice firm and unwavering, referring to the kings of Syria and Israel. "Their power is fading, their threat fleeting." King Ahaz looked at him, his face a mask of anxious disbelief. "But how can I not be afraid? They are already at our gates, pressing in." Isaiah remained unmoved, his gaze steady. "God himself will give you a sign, something that will prove, beyond all doubt, that he is still in absolute control." He paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle, then looked straight into the king's terrified eyes. "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us." A heavy, stunned silence descended upon the room, so profound that a pin dropping would have sounded like thunder. "What?" asked Ahaz, visibly confused, his voice barely a whisper. "A virgin conceiving? That's impossible. That defies all natural law." The advisors around him began to murmur, exchanging incredulous, doubtful glances. "This makes absolutely no sense," whispered one. "Isaiah, you speak in riddles and fantastical impossibilities," said another, irritation coloring his tone. Jeremiah, who had accompanied Isaiah to the palace, stepped closer and whispered, "Isaiah, are you absolutely certain of what you heard? This is extraordinary." Isaiah nodded firmly, his conviction radiating from him. "Absolutely. While the men in the room questioned, laughed nervously, and openly mocked the prophecy, Isaiah stood perfectly still, an immovable rock in a sea of doubt. His gaze was fixed on something far beyond human understanding, a truth only he could perceive. Emmanuel, he repeated softly, almost like a sacred prayer, the name a powerful echo of God's deepest promise. As they left the palace, Jeremiah walked beside Isaiah, his mind still reeling, utterly stunned by the audacity of the prophecy. A virgin? How? How can such an impossible thing happen? Isaiah stopped, turning to face his friend, his eyes holding a divine light. I don't know, Jeremiah. I don't understand the how, but I know with every fiber of my being that this is what God revealed. And I know that one day that child will be born. But the people, Jeremiah insisted, gesturing helplessly. They hardly believe what you already say. How can they possibly accept something as utterly unbelievable as this? Isaiah looked up at the sky, now covered in heavy gray clouds, a perfect reflection of the somber mood. I don't understand it all either, my friend, but I know I must speak. I cannot hold back the word of the Lord. In the days that followed, the news of the seemingly outlandish prophecy spread quickly through Jerusalem like wildfire. Wherever he went, Isaiah heard the comments, the whispers, the incredulous exclamations. A son from a virgin? Madness, some said, dismissing it outright. Now the prophet is truly delusional, lost in his fantasies, others mocked, their voices dripping with sarcasm. There were open laughs, cutting jests, and even direct insults hurled his way. One morning, as he walked towards the temple, Isaiah was approached by a group of young men, their faces a mix of bravado and mockery. "Hey, prophet!" one of them shouted, a sneer on his face. "When's your Emmanuel coming? We're all waiting with bated breath. We get it. You love metaphors and impossible tales, right?" Laughter erupted from the group. Isaiah said nothing. But inside, the inner conflict, the struggle between his prophetic calling and the world's unbelief, grew more intense. That night, lying sleepless in bed, Isaiah couldn't find rest. The vivid images from the vision haunted him. The face of that servant, the look of profound compassion, the unsettling expression of suffering and unyielding determination, all intertwined at once. He rose and walked to the small table where he kept his precious scrolls and began writing again, his pen flowing with divine inspiration. "I have made you a light to the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth." Isaiah paused for a moment, staring at the phrase, "a light to the Gentiles." This was unimaginable, a revelation that shattered all preconceived notions. Salvation, not just for Israel, but for all nations, for the entire world. He ran his hands over his face, trying to sort through the overwhelming rush of his thoughts, the implications of such a universal truth. What does all this mean, Lord? Who is this servant truly? Why does he carry so much suffering, so much pain? A chill ran down his spine. For the very first time, Isaiah had the profound impression that the story being revealed to him went far beyond his human understanding, far beyond the confines of his own time and culture. Isaiah was on the verge of discovering something that would change absolutely everything he believed about God, about humanity, about the very future itself. Little by little, Isaiah's profound words about the mysterious servant began to echo more loudly through the bustling, often skeptical streets of Jerusalem.
But instead of bringing comfort or understanding, they stirred confusion, irritation, and, most profoundly, an intensified rejection. On a cloudy, oppressive morning, Isaiah stood at one of the busiest street corners in the city. His voice rang out, firm yet heavy with an underlying sorrow, a profound awareness of the truth he bore. On a cloudy, oppressive morning, Isaiah stood at one of the busiest street corners in the city. His voice rang out, firm yet heavy with an underlying sorrow, a profound awareness of the truth he bore. Listen, O house of Israel, the Lord has revealed his servant, a man of sorrows, intimately acquainted with suffering, despised and rejected by men. Passers-by stopped for a moment, their activities momentarily suspended. Some looked with disdain, their eyes filled with scorn. Others merely offered a blank stare of indifference. "There he goes again," muttered a merchant, his voice weary. "Always speaking of suffering, always doom and gloom." Who wants to hear about that? We want to hear about victory, about salvation, about strength, not about pain. Isaiah continued, his gaze fixed on a truth far beyond their comprehension, ignoring the piercing, hateful glances around him. The servant will offer his back to those who strike him, and his cheeks to those who pull out his beard. He will not hide his face from insults or spit. He will be humiliated, subjected to the worst indignities, yet he will not open his mouth to defend himself, remaining silent in the face of injustice. Suddenly, a stone flew through the air, hitting the ground with a sharp crack just beside his feet. "Enough, Isaiah!" shouted a man, his eyes burning with intense hatred. "I'm done with your words of doom and despair. We need hope, not this." Other angry voices joined in, a chorus of resentment. "Shut up, prophet of sorrow! Why would God choose a weak, suffering man to be his servant? We want a liberator, a mighty warrior, a king." Isaiah felt his chest tighten, a profound ache in his soul. Even surrounded by the agitated crowd, the crushing weight of solitude pressed heavier than ever before. Later that afternoon, as he returned to the quiet solace of his home, Isaiah was met with something that hurt even deeper, a pain more personal and piercing than any stone. His own cousin, Eliab, who he had grown up with, sharing countless memories and childhood joys, was waiting for him at the door, his face grim. "Isaiah," Eliab began, glancing around nervously to make sure no one was listening, his voice hushed but strained. "I've come to ask you, please, stop this. Stop now." "Stop?" Isaiah responded, his voice breaking, filled with incredulity and sorrow. "People are saying you've gone mad, Isaiah. No one wants to do business with our family anymore. My daughters are being avoided by their friends, our relatives. They're all ashamed of your name, of your prophecies." Isaiah lowered his head, the blow cutting deep into his heart, the betrayal from his own kin a searing wound. "Eliab, I didn't choose this path, but God chose me. I can't stay silent. I must speak his truth." His cousin clenched his fists in frustration, his face contorted with anger. "Then bear the consequences alone. Don't count on me anymore, or on our family." Without waiting for a reply, Eliab turned abruptly and walked away, leaving Isaiah standing utterly alone. Jeremiah, who had watched the heartbreaking exchange from a distance, approached, his eyes filled with compassion. "Isaiah, even your family now, even them turning away?" "Yes, Jeremiah," Isaiah replied, his eyes filled with fresh tears, his voice raw with pain. Even them.
That night, Isaiah, utterly broken, withdrew into the sacred solitude of the temple. He fell to his knees before the ancient altar and cried out, his voice a guttural groan of agony. "Lord, how long? How long will I be mocked? How long will I be rejected by those I love, by my own flesh and blood?" As he wept, his tears mingling with the dust of the temple floor, a new vision began to take shape, more vivid and excruciating than any before.
This time the servant was even clearer, his suffering laid bare. Isaiah saw the gentle-eyed man being shoved, brutally beaten, spat upon by an angry, unfeeling mob. The servant remained silent, enduring every blow, every insult, without retaliation, without a single word of complaint. Isaiah cried out in agony, his spirit convulsing, "Why so much suffering? Who is this man, Lord? What has he done to deserve such cruelty?" But the vision did not end there. It deepened, growing more horrifying. "Who is this man, Lord? What has he done to deserve such cruelty?" But the vision did not end there. It deepened, growing more horrifying. Isaiah's gaze was drawn to a terrifying detail he hadn't noticed before. He saw blood. The servant's face was covered in blood, but it wasn't just a superficial wound. It was flowing from open, gaping wounds on his back, as if he had been scourged, viciously punished, publicly humiliated in the most brutal way. Isaiah covered his face in utter despair, his heart racing. My God, what is this? Who would commit such unspeakable cruelty against an innocent man? His heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat of horror. The tears fell uncontrollably, a torrent of grief and disbelief. And there, alone and rejected on the cold temple floor, the prophet understood, with a chilling clarity, that the pain he carried, the rejection he endured, was only a faint shadow, a mere whisper, of the unimaginable pain that this servant would one day endure. Amidst the crushing weight of rejection and the horrifying visions, Isaiah now saw a terrifying detail. He could not sleep. The agonizing images from the last vision haunted him night after night, relentless and unforgiving. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that man's face, the servant, a gaze so full of profound pain, of utter rejection, and at the same time infused with a strange and inexplicable compassion that defied all human understanding. On a cold, desolate morning, Isaiah climbed the same barren hill where he had prayed so many countless times before, his spirit burdened, his body weary. He knelt with his face pressed to the ground and cried out in raw agony, his voice hoarse, "Lord, please, I can't take this anymore. My soul is weary unto death. Why do you make me see this unspeakable suffering?" And once again, as so many times before, the heavens seemed to tear open before him, revealing a glimpse of divine truth. The vision came strong and relentless, overwhelming his senses. Isaiah saw the servant now in even greater, more horrifying detail than ever before. The man walked slowly down a narrow, dusty street, surrounded by a swirling crowd of people who looked at him with profound disdain. Some spat on the ground as he passed, an act of utter contempt. Others merely shook their heads in disapproval, their faces hardened. An inner voice, resonant and clear, began to narrate in Isaiah's mind, as if God himself were dictating the sacred words.
He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest suffering. Isaiah gasped for breath, the words piercing his very soul. He saw the servant being pushed, roughly dragged, brutally beaten without mercy, without a shred of human kindness. His face was swollen, covered in grotesque bruises, his eyes barely open from so many blows, yet still, inexplicably, they conveyed a profound, all-encompassing love. How can he look like that? Isaiah murmured, tears falling uncontrollably, hot and relentless down his cheeks. And the divine voice continued, solemn and mournful. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Isaiah collapsed completely to his knees, his whole body trembling violently, convulsing with grief. The pain he saw was so real, so intense, it felt as if it pierced his own flesh, tearing at his very being. Suddenly, the scene shifted, intensifying the horror. Now the servant was being scoured. Isaiah saw his back, torn, lacerated, bleeding profusely with every brutal lash of the whip. "No!" cried the prophet, his voice a primal scream of anguish. "This is too much! I can't bear this sight! Don't show me any more!" But the vision continued, unyielding, relentless. The whips fell hard, with a sickening thud. The skin ripped in strips, flaying away. Blood flowed, dark and viscous, mixing with the dust of the road. And yet the servant did not complain. Blood flowed, dark and viscous, mixing with the dust of the road. And yet the servant did not complain. He did not fight back. He did not resist, offering no struggle, no defense. Why? Why does he accept this unspeakable cruelty? Isaiah murmured between wrenching sobs, his voice choked with despair. And then, as if God himself were answering his agonizing question, the sacred voice continued, with a profound, almost devastating clarity. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. Isaiah, utterly overwhelmed, shook his head frantically, desperately trying to cast out the horrifying image. But it remained unshakable, cruelly vivid, terrifyingly real. Isaiah, utterly overwhelmed, shook his head frantically, desperately trying to cast out the horrifying image. But it remained unshakable, cruelly vivid, terrifyingly real. The vision continued, relentlessly pressing its truth upon him. Now the servant was being led somewhere, a destination unknown to Isaiah, but he could hear the cacophony of shouting, of mockery, and the distant, heart-wrenching weeping of women. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities, the voice continued, each word a hammer blow to Isaiah's soul. Isaiah felt his strength leave him completely. His legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed, prostrate and utterly broken, to the ground. "Crushed," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "because of our guilt, our sins." The crushing weight of the revelation, the personal implication, was suffocating, stealing his breath. Then the final scene of that vision struck him like a physical blow to the chest. The servant lying still, utterly motionless, his body covered in a multitude of wounds, eyes closed, lifeless, a profound stillness settling over him. Isaiah covered his face with his hands and screamed in raw despair, a cry torn from the depths of his being. "Lord, I can't take it anymore! Don't show me anymore!" It's too much for me. I cannot bear this weight." The wind blew fiercely over the hill, a mournful wail. Dry leaves swirled around the prophet, lying prostrate and weeping on the ground. He remained there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity, his body shaking with unutterable grief. Jeremiah, who had been searching for him since morning, his heart heavy with concern, finally found him. "Isaiah, what happened? Are you all right?" Isaiah lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and broken, his voice weak, trembling, full of raw desperation. "No, Jeremiah, I'm not all right." "What I saw, what God showed me, I feel I can't bear it anymore. The weight is too immense." Jeremiah helped him slowly to his feet, but Isaiah knew, with a chilling certainty, what he had just witnessed was only the beginning of a far greater, more profound suffering for the world, for humanity. He felt he could endure no more, not knowing this was only the commencement of the ultimate divine plan. Isaiah could barely lift himself from the ground after the last devastating vision of the wounded and humiliated servant. The images were still seared into his mind with terrifying clarity, an indelible stain on his soul. The words he had heard echoed like a silent thunder in the deepest chambers of his heart, each one a profound and painful truth. Even as he stumbled home, his legs felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive. Each step was a monumental effort, dragged forward as if the crushing weight of all the suffering he had witnessed rested squarely upon his own fragile shoulders. Jeremiah walked closely behind him, his loyal presence a silent comfort, watching with deep, abiding concern. "Isaiah," he said gently, his voice soft, placing a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. "Ever since that vision, you barely speak, barely sleep. Your spirit is troubled. What did you truly see, my friend?" Isaiah stopped, took a deep, shuddering breath, and with trembling hands picked up a new scroll, the raw, unfolding truth compelling him. Something deep in his spirit compelled him. The words came with an overwhelming urgency, a divine torrent. Isaiah closed his eyes. The visions returned, but this time everything seemed to make profound, astonishing sense, clicking into place like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. He saw the servant, yes, but he also saw the unlikely birth from a virgin, a miracle of divine intervention. He saw the child grow, full of an otherworldly wisdom, bringing comfort to the afflicted, miraculous healing to the sick, liberating freedom to the oppressed, challenging the very foundations of human power. He also saw the scorn, the bitter betrayal, the unimaginable suffering, the death that seemed to be the end. And then, most astonishingly, he saw life emerging where there had only been death, a triumphant, glorious resurrection that defied all logic. Isaiah opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face, a mixture of profound sorrow and unutterable joy. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of revelation. "Everything points to him. Everything I saw, every word of judgment, every promise of redemption, every terrifying image of suffering and glorious resurrection, it all points to the Messiah, the servant, Emmanuel, the Prince of Peace." He paused, wiping the tears from his eyes, a profound understanding now illuminating his soul. They are all him. One man, one unified plan, one ultimate Savior for all humanity. Jeremiah stood in stunned silence, utterly speechless, his mind reeling from the magnitude of Isaiah's pronouncement. "But Isaiah, how can that be? You're speaking of things that will happen centuries from now. How can you be so absolutely certain?" Isaiah picked up the scroll, his hands now steady, and with a firm, clear voice he recited the prophetic words that were now flowing from his pen. "He shall see the fruit of the travail of his soul, and be satisfied. By his knowledge my righteous servant shall justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities." The prophet set down the pen, his eyes brimming with tears, a profound peace settling over him as he looked at his friend. "I am writing the very gospel itself, Jeremiah, even before it happens, before the events unfold." Jeremiah dropped into a seat, speechless, overwhelmed by the sheer miraculous audacity of the prophecy. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head in awe. Isaiah continued, his voice gaining strength, now filled with an unshakable conviction. "The nations will see him. Kings will shut their mouths because of him, rendered silent by his glory. He will be exalted, lifted up, and greatly glorified. But before that, he will be rejected, pierced, crushed for us, for our sins." Isaiah rose, walked to the window, and gazed at the distant horizon, a vision of the future now clear in his mind. "I don't understand all the intricate details, Jeremiah, the precise mechanics, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. One day, when this servant comes, he will fulfill everything God has shown me. Every single word, every painful tear, every glorious promise." His friend, still in shock, asked in a low, reverent voice, "And the people, Isaiah, will they believe this truth when it unfolds?" Isaiah smiled, his expression a profound blend of pain endured and an enduring, triumphant hope. "Some will, Jeremiah. Some will embrace him. Others won't, their hearts remaining hardened. But when it all happens, when every single prophecy is fulfilled, the whole world, every corner of it, will know his name, will recognize his glory." He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and, with his gaze fixed on the heavens, declared aloud, his voice ringing with divine authority, "For the Lord of hosts has spoken, and his word never fails, never returns void." At that moment, a deep, abiding certainty filled Isaiah's heart, an unshakable peace. He, Isaiah, had been chosen to record the greatest, most intricate plan in the history of humanity, a plan that would only be fully understood centuries later, but which was beginning right there, in each prophetic line, in every profound utterance flowing from his mouth. And now, as he finished writing, as the last word was penned, Isaiah set down the quill, took a deep, cleansing breath, and smiled, his eyes brimming with the quiet triumph of divine truth. And now, as he finished writing, as the last word was penned, Isaiah set down the quill, took a deep, cleansing breath, and smiled, his eyes brimming with the quiet triumph of divine truth. And now, do you understand why the book of Isaiah stands as perhaps the most astonishing, the most breathtaking book in the entire Bible? The revelation might just shatter your preconceived notions and shock you to your core. When Isaiah finally laid down his prophecies, he may not have fully grasped the profound magnitude of the legacy he was leaving to the world. He was just a man, with his own doubts, his own deep-seated fears, his own flowing tears, but also with a monumental courage that few ever possess. A man who chose to obey God, to speak his truth, even when everyone around him rejected him, mocked him, and abandoned him. A man who, even without fully understanding every intricate detail, kept writing, kept speaking, kept prophesying the unfolding of God's grand design. Today, when we look at the ancient pages of the book of Isaiah, we don't see mere ancient texts or beautiful poetic words. We see a prophetic map, an astonishing timeline stretching across countless centuries, pointing directly and unequivocally to the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Every single detail described, from the miraculous virgin birth to the brutal, agonizing suffering, from his profound rejection to his glorious resurrection, was fulfilled with a precision that utterly defies all human logic, all human explanation. And what about the prophecies yet to be fulfilled? Suitable for audiobooks, commercial voiceovers. The Isaiah also spoke with breathtaking clarity of the second coming of the Messiah, the glorious return, a promise of a kingdom of eternal peace, where there will be no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, no more pain, as declared in Isaiah 25:8. Isaiah's powerful words are more than just ancient history. They are an invitation, a profound call for you to choose to trust, just as he did, even in the face of overwhelming rejection. To proclaim hope, unwavering and true, even amidst the most crushing crises. To believe fiercely in God's promises, even when everything around you screams the exact opposite, when doubt threatens to consume you. If Isaiah, living centuries before Christ walked the earth, could see so clearly what we would only come to understand much later, imagine what God can still reveal to you today in your own life. And so, the question that echoes into our time, simple yet profoundly powerful, remains: what about you? Are you ready to live with the same unwavering faith and profound courage as the prophet Isaiah? Are you ready to believe that just as every word from that distant time was meticulously fulfilled, God's specific promises for your life, for your future, will also come gloriously true? The book of Isaiah is not just ancient history. It is a living testimony, a vibrant, powerful truth that God speaks. And when he speaks, absolutely nothing, no human doubt, no earthly power can stop his divine word from being perfectly fulfilled. Rise, believe, proclaim, because the same powerful God who called Isaiah is calling you today, extending his divine purpose to your very life.